Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reverend Katie Sexton, and I have the great honor of serving as Executive Director of the Arizona Faith Network, an interfaith network that works across the state of Arizona with numerous different traditions. We have been longtime partners of the Sierra Club, the Grand Canyon chapter, and have done a ton of work with Sandy Farr and many of our other advocacy legends across the many years of trying to work within the Arizona legislature. I apologize, I'm not with you live. I will be joining by phone, but I am currently right now down at the Arizona border with other clergy working on a different advocacy issue, but it does intertwine with what we're going to be talking about today. It's no secret that Arizona is hot. It's been hot for a long time, but the last 2 years, we have been in an extreme heat crisis. We have seen unprecedented heat that has harmed our communities, specifically harmed our vulnerable communities, and stolen many lives of Arizonans. We have made news across the nation showing that we have been setting records for heat deaths, heat temperatures, overnight lows, and many other issues and concerns that are threatening our great state. In 2023, we saw 133 days of temperatures above 100 and 55 days above 110, marking it at that time one of the hottest months and years on record. In 2024, however, we beat that. We saw over 142 days with temperatures above 100 and 70 days with temperatures above 110. We set new records both for extreme heat for the consecutive days of 110 and 100. We also set records in October. Generally, our heat season used to historically run from May until September, but in October, we saw the first ever 110 days recorded last year. There were 4 of them. That's showing us that this heat is not just the normal heat we're experiencing in Arizona. We aren't just able to say it's a desert, it's hot, it's always been hot, it's going to continue to be hot, but we are seeing the impacts and effects of climate change on our communities by the elongation of the heat season. It's getting hotter earlier and it's staying hotter longer. And perhaps what is most concerning from a public health perspective is that it's staying hotter at night. So those nighttime temperatures, those record high lows have also increased. We saw in 2024 a record number of overnight lows of 90 degrees plus. There were 39 record low nights in Maricopa County. We are bursting and breaking records all over the place, and it is starting to really harm our state. This is a climate crisis we are in, and we have to address at the state legislature and in our communities in order to save lives, because unfortunately, many people are dying. 2023 saw 990 heat-related or caused deaths across the state of Arizona. These are numbers that are reported by the Arizona Department of Health Services. These deaths were due to extreme heat, and it's really helping to highlight that we need to expand our heat relief efforts and our efforts to combat, mitigate, and reverse the climate crisis in Arizona. Maricopa County has been hit the hardest by these deaths. We're still looking at 2023 data because the 2024 data is not yet finalized and released, but we'll go over a little bit of that in just a few moments. You can see from this graph provided by Maricopa County Public Health that from 2022 to 2023, we saw a 52% increase in heat-related deaths. You can see some of the demographic information there too, but the startling numbers are looking from 2013 to 2023 in that 10-year time span. Just what a massive increase that is in the number of Arizonans that have died because of heat, because of weather, because of the climate crisis, because of things. If we can get our lawmakers and our advocates moving and shaking to address this crisis, we can prevent every single one of these deaths was likely preventable. And we need to do better as we move forward, but we can't do that without bringing our policymakers along with us. This particularly impacts the population of older adults. So we're seeing that almost 2 out of 3 heat-related deaths were over 50 in age or older. We're also seeing that 80% of these deaths were among residents, people who lived here. They weren't just visitors within our state that didn't know how to handle themselves in the heat. These are people that lived and called Maricopa County and Arizona their home. We are seeing an intersectionality in these deaths too, among people who are experiencing homelessness. So the intersectionality of affordable housing, of our cycle of poverty here, of the substance use crisis that's happening, and also mental health conditions that are going untreated that are causing these deaths as well. In Pima County, the deaths also rose in 2023, seeing 226 cases. Similarly, seeing about a 50% split or so, 50 to outdoor deaths to indoor deaths. So that was similar in Maricopa County data too, that it wasn't just our folks that are indoors, outdoors, that are passing away from heat, but it's a lot of folks that are indoors too. So people that are unable to pay their utility bills, that are afraid of the bill that's going to come down the line, that are not aware of the resources that are out there that they can utilize and tap into. There are a lot of stories that we are hearing of people who went to sleep when they were taking a nap and their air conditioner broke and they passed away because they were of an older age and their body couldn't handle while they were sleeping the extreme heat. There are so many things that have to do with infrastructure, but ultimately track back to the fact that we are in this climate crisis and we have abused and misused our climate here to the point where it is starting to harm us as we have harmed it too. So at Arizona Faith Network, to back up just for a minute, the reason why a faith network is involved in this work beyond the morality and the stewardship of the climate and many reasons why we are called into this work is also because we were pulled in the pandemic when all of the government buildings were closed in 2020 and asked to help run heat relief sites because we couldn't use government buildings due to the COVID-19 pandemic closures. We began opening up faith communities and realized that in our highest hit areas, our historically disenfranchised communities, which are the hottest communities when we overlay those maps, our hottest communities are our historically disenfranchised communities and neighborhoods too, is where we needed heat relief locations but did not have them. And so we were able to start working in South Phoenix and Maryville and South Glendale, Tempe, and Mesa with the cities, the county, and the state to begin opening up what we call heat respite centers where folks can come in and cool off. The first few years we did this, we didn't always track the data the best. We had 2 to 3 sites in 21, and that grew to about, I think, 8 to 10. And this last year, we had 15 heat relief sites where people could come in across these different locations, bring their pets in, cool down, get access to resources in terms of support with housing or substance use needs, or support in accessing different case management systems and get water and snack. And they could be inside during the peak heat hours of the day, bring their pets inside and rest. They could be there for uninterrupted rest. We saw over 48,000 visits this summer from May through the middle of October across our sites. 48,000 visits. One of the reasons why we are working at the state legislature on advocacy is this is just one glimpse of one organization that's involved in this work, and there are hundreds doing this work, and none of this work has sustainable funding. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit too. We have our largest sites in the Glendale and Maryville area. I'm just kind of breezing through, as well as Tempe, some of this data. I'm happy to send this to you separately so you can see that. At our sites, we see a very high number of folks who identify themselves as experiencing homelessness, but not exclusively. Most people are coming in even from the neighborhoods to access cooler air and resources while they are there. We are seeing heat impact mostly men in our community, with about a 70-30 split between male and female self-identified genders. And then also predominantly from the ages of 25 to about 50. This last year, we started tracking if people were veterans or not, and we did see about a little under 1,500 veterans using our centers. It's just giving a scale of how big this issue is, that folks are predominantly seeing it through word of mouth and signs, and where they go to access heat relief resources. So libraries, community centers, faith communities, friends or family, government buildings. And really learning where they are able to get help. So as we shared, or as I shared earlier, the impact of extreme heat hits our vulnerable communities the hardest. We're talking about communities that have not been invested in for many years, were historically redlined and have been victims of systemic racism over the years too. On top of all of these communities that are already facing many issues, they're often also facing issues with physical injuries, health conditions, substance use disorders, economic concerns, job concerns, transportation concerns, all amongst this heat crisis that we are seeing like before. So when we're really talking about extreme heat, we can't talk about it without talking about the intersectionality of these other issues we're seeing throughout Arizona. The record high evictions, the strain on our healthcare resources, the energy insecurity, the urban heat island effect, as we have more companies and organizations and people moving into Arizona, which we want to celebrate. We also have a greater drain on our resources that's impacting our climate, like water scarcity and drought and infrastructure issues. And we have to be addressing these all across the board together. So I want to dive a little bit into what's been going on with policy and legislation and advocacy over the last few years, because under Governor Hobbs and under some of our current leadership, we have made massive strides in heat work, but we have a really long way to go. Governor Hobbs and the creation of the Office of Resiliency has really taken this on, and the new creation of their extreme heat response, which we'll dive into in a minute too, has really taken this on. But up until the Hobbs administration, we were not addressing this collectively as a state in a way that was going to lead to the changes that we have seen or need, and we are very, very far behind. So a few years ago, I was joking with some of our leaders in the heat space that we should take our lawmakers on a 120-degree day and put them on a bus and take them out in the heat to our heat relief sites. So we actually did it. We spent time getting lawmakers and advocates on a bus, telling our stories from the city perspectives, from the faith networks perspectives, from the perspectives of people using the centers, of people living in heat, of people living outdoors in heat, of not being able to pay their power bills. We also worked to really bring together a press conference from the governor's office to our U.S. Senators and Congress members to respond and start elevating and changing the conversation from it's hot in Arizona, oh, here's a tent where you can go get a bottle of water, to we really have to start looking at this from a policy perspective and implementation perspective systemically. So at that time, this was 2 years ago, in 2022, we asked that we would establish a consistent and sustainable funding source to support nonprofits, cities, public health agencies, counties, and other partners who are working to deliver life-saving heat relief services. Currently, there is a critical lack of sustainable funding for this essential work in Arizona, which hinders the capacity to effectively provide relief and support during extreme heat events. The second ask was to create standard requirements and guidelines for establishment of cooling centers and heat respite centers based on population density throughout Arizona. This has been implemented some, and I'm excited to share that there has been some really great changes. In 2020, the state declared a heat emergency, and through that declaration, Governor Hobbs created new roles. The county and state public health have taken over heat relief work alongside the Maricopa Association of Governments with the heat relief map. This work was previously held by ASU and volunteers from the communities. Governor's office released a state extreme heat plan, which you can still find on the governor's website, which created the role of the first ever state chief heat officer in the United States, which Dr. Eugene LeVar has taken and really been running with that role and working with all partners. Federal and state legislative and budget advocacy was just beginning around that time. And you probably saw this, that Congressman Gallego in 2023 introduced HR 3965, the Extreme Heat Emergency Act of 2023. And what it was trying to do was add to the Stafford Act, which guides FEMA and other disaster relief and emergency assistance, to add heat to the definition, extreme heat to the definition of a major disaster. Right now, there is, in the Stafford Act, FEMA has not been able to respond to extreme heat events because heat is not considered a natural disaster. That's not moved yet. It hasn't passed yet. It's still there and lingering. That's some other advocacy we need to do at the federal level. Just very quickly, also on the federal level, we were able to attend with ASU, SRP, APS, the governor's office, health services, and loads of other representation, the first ever Extreme Heat Policy Innovation Summit in Washington, D.C. last year, and present. But today we're talking about the state. And so we really want to be clear on what we're trying to advocate beyond putting pressure on our federal government to take actions where they can. We really need to be working with lawmakers on the state level to develop ideas and solutions for moving forward, because to be quite frank, as a lifelong Arizonan, as someone who is born, raised here, loves the state, and wants the state to live and thrive and be a place where we can live and we can thrive and stay alive, we have some work to do. We need to make it okay to stay here and live here. There's a lot of work that has been going on with annual heat gatherings. Some of our emergency management, through the direction of the state, has stepped in. This was the first ever state heat emergency executive order, which you can also find on the state's website, governor's website. But today I want to talk a little bit more about the 2025 legislative asks that we need to focus on at Environmental Day at the Capitol. So you probably saw in the great briefing document that Sandy and the Sierra Club put together. Apologies, the first sentence is a little cut off there, but I'll read it. This paragraph, it reads, we ask the Arizona legislature to support Governor Hobbs' Office of Resiliency and its work to develop climate action plan to help ensure that Arizona is better prepared for the continued impacts of climate change and to remove barriers to climate action, including the provisions in the law that prohibit Arizona Department of Environmental Quality from doing anything to assess or limit greenhouse gas emissions. Again, this will directly address the climate crisis and how it's getting hotter in the state. We request that the Arizona legislature repeal laws that preempt local action to regulate fossil fuels and reduce waste. The legislature should pass bills to promote and invest in transportation, electrification, fully utilizing the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law funding, including to promote electric school and transit buses, along with a more robust electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and help to promote greater energy efficiency, our cheapest, cleanest resource, emphasizing access to collaboratively develop a efficiency for low-income communities and renters. State agencies must be directed to work collaboratively to develop a climate action plan for Arizona to reduce our state greenhouse gas emissions and to effectively implement provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act and Justice for Initiative that requires more resources be directed into communities that have disproportionately suffered the impacts of climate change. Again, if we overlay the map of the hottest neighborhoods in Arizona, it directly aligns with the neighborhoods that have been historically redlined and have had historical disenfranchisement. Finally, we ask that the legislature and the governor reject any bills to hinder clean, renewable solar and wind energy and any bills that erect impediments to pollution-free transportation. So those are a few asks for this legislative session. And this is not to sanction necessarily by the Sierra Club, but I have a couple more that I want us to begin working on too as I'm speaking from the direct service route of heat relief too. So some of the big things that are gonna need work over the next few years is there is no current sustainable funding to address heat in Arizona. Everything that we have been working off of has either been reallocated and moved around, or predominantly all of this heat relief work has been done through ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We have to develop sustainable funding to address a diversity of solutions, including funding to run the heat relief network operations as we continue to address some of these other issues, these intersectionalities that are causing Arizonans to die in extreme heat, as well as to address, reverse, prevent, and mitigate the climate crisis happening here in Arizona. So funding is one. Another legislative ask I am suggesting we begin thinking about, and we're not going to necessarily push this year, but thinking about, is to prevent evictions during the extreme heat season. Last year, as you can see on this beautiful map provided by Arizona State University's Knowledge Exchange for Resilience, 7,903 people were evicted in July, right smack dab in the hottest time, the hottest month of the year here in Maricopa County. That is setting them up to be impacted and their lives on the line by this extreme heat we are facing. So that is our input from Arizona Faith Network. I hope that I've been able to join you by phone now from the border area and able to talk a little bit more about any questions you may have. Again, we're coming at it from this perspective of being involved in the heat relief network and on the ground with people who are impacted the most by extreme heat. I believe my colleague, Irene Rushdown, who is our community resilience and heat relief manager is also on the phone to address any questions or concerns you might have. And you can also reach out directly to me or to Irene or our team at arizonafaithnetwork.org. And I'm just so grateful for this time that we had to present. And Sandy, I hope I did you proud, and Arizona Interfaith Power and Light. Hope I did you proud too as a key partner in this work. And I will see you on Environmental Day at the legislature coming up really soon. Many blessings.